All right, guys, we are live. Welcome to the Camera Store. My name is Dave. I will be your host for tonight's in-store event and for all of our online viewers as well. This is fantastic to actually be able to do this again. Jackie, stay off the frame, stay off the frame.
Oh, gosh.
I'm going to introduce you.
Wow.
It's exciting here. So this morning's coffee talk is Give Your Subject a Voice with Jacquie Matechuk. Now, she's a fantastic person, but she's also a fantastic presenter as well. So we're going to bring her on in a second here. But this event is sponsored by Canada. We're happy to have Russ from Canada here in the corner. Nobody puts Russ in the corner, but today we did. He's brought some amazing lenses, some great quality glass. We also have our own stuff in the store as well. Now, because of that, we are having a special promotion with Canon. So if you register for the event already online, we're going to send you out an email with that offer. And if you haven't done that and you want to, just email Evelyn. It's evelyn@thecamstore.com, and she'll follow up with you an email there. And for those people in attendance here, we'll talk about it after the live stream ends here. So. I also want to say there is a bunch of work. I don't know if you noticed, there's a bunch of people running around here with cables and microphones and what's going on here. We have our TCSTV Live Dream team back there. We have Gary and Graham who are monitoring all of that, making sure everything goes nice and smooth. Now, part of what I really like about live stream and in person is the ability to interact with everybody and get questions and what have you. So we will be monitoring the chat as well, looking for questions that we're going to present with Jackie after the show, after a presentation, and follow up as much as we can with what our time is allowed with that. Now, here's the fun part. So if you're not already familiar with our guest today, Jacquie Matechuk is an ambassador for Canada, an f-stop gear. Jacquie Matechuk embraces the opportunity to spend time with her fellow photographers, helping them to improve and nurture their inspiration. On her travels, she'll capture everything from epic scenery and iconic architecture to various forms of wildlife and professional sports. Jacquie's photographic diversity is fueled by her commitment to conservation and ethical practices, and today they have inspired numerous international awards. A Master's of Photography Arts, 11 national accreditations, and most recently a position traveling with Adventure Canada as a photographer in residence. Welcome, Jacquie. We are happy to have you back at the camera store.
Thank you guys so much, so much. And to you, Dave, the whole group here at the camera store, it is so nice to be back in here. It feels like family coming back in.
Well, we've had you on as a live stream before,
Yep.
but there's no in-person audience, so it's a whole different dynamic here, which is very, very cool.
This is way better.
So I'll let you have at it, and
'Kay.
We'll be back after.
That sounds great. So as Dave mentioned, huge thanks to all the team here for making this happen. It's so nice to be back, and even more special to have people right in front of me sharing it with. So thank you for taking a beautiful morning coming in here. And Ken in Canada, my heart is so full. This last couple of years has been life-changing, and all of that is to do with the gear in my hand, meeting the people I get to meet, and helping people grow. That's what we're here to do today. So I don't want to spend much time talking about myself at all, but really quick, of everybody that's sitting here in front of me right now, raise your hand if you are currently a wildlife photographer, or if you are planning to be a wildlife photographer. Just show of hands. Oh, wow. Yeah, absolutely. Trying totally counts. Okay, so there's quite a few wildlife photographers here already. I do get a lot of people that will ask, why wildlife photography? Obviously, you all know, for the money. You're right. No, it's not for the money. There is no money. It goes one way, it goes out. It does not come in. So it's definitely not for the money, but it is for the love of what we do. It's for the animals and the places we get to visit and connect with that so few people are given that opportunity. So what I want to do today is I want to talk about how I can give you some of my trials and errors and the things that I've figured out along the way that have helped me create some of my more successful images, so that you can take those into practice like tomorrow or today and start changing what you do. Some really simple things, and some I'm going to challenge us to look at our relationship with our cameras in a completely different light than you ever have. So the cameras that we pick up and the power we hold in our hands, that is not a piece of equipment. In my mind, when I'm out there, this is my partner. I literally think of this as a relationship. Me and this camera, just like a good marriage or a good partnership in business, there is a mesh of weaknesses and strengths. And that's what I have done with my camera, is I've made it work where I fall short. And that's how you end up really leveraging the technology that we get in our hands. So if you can kind of make that mental shift, anything that you're finding as a challenge out there, I would almost guarantee you there is a solution to setting up that camera that's going to help you with it. So I'm going to come back to that in a little bit, but I want to start first with sharing a bunch of images and talking about the components in those images that I think have made it more impactful, and things that you're going to be able to start doing right away, like I say. So with that, now I'm new with the clicker thing, so there's my disclaimer right off the bat. Again, so this is going to be things that I have discovered, and I realize my experiences may not resonate with everyone, so please take the things that help you, leave the rest. Don't email me how wrong I am. I get you may not agree with everything. That's totally okay. But hopefully you can take a few things home with you today as well. So, giving your subject a voice. So we talk about, in order to do that, we have to find a way to create impact. And that's a really great term. But how? How do you create impact? I was sick of hearing people say that. You have to have images with impact. I want to know how. So this is what we're going to start looking at. So I want to break down a few different components that I look for to help those images have that impact. And what we're looking for is a cause to pause. Think about going through that Instagram account or that Facebook account. And we are saturated with visuals nowadays. We see it everywhere all the time. So what does it take to make you stop for a second? Even that momentary pause. Because no matter what we do as creatives, the beautiful story that we might write included in that post, if we can't get the person to stop first, you don't even have a stage. You don't even get to tell the story. So that moment that you capture, that image you choose, is really important when you want to catch attention. So the first thing I've found is relatable. So think about things that people are going to see, that they can see something that's similar to what a person would do, right? So it might be something like your emotion, whether it's how you feel, it could be a little mannerism. You know, this little Andean bear cub, you know, for me, I saw a lot of compassion and emotion, and it was one of those, you just felt the little tug on the heartstrings there. Sitting so casual, little foot flipped up, and just daydreaming, right? Do we daydream as people? You bet. So all of a sudden, there's something relatable for people that have never seen this bear, that have no idea what Ecuador is about, may not be conservation or even photography driven, but I can get them to pause for just a second and talk to them about the story behind it. On most of these pictures, I am going to put the little exit data in the corners so that you can go back at any point and take a look. Sometimes this exit data is really important, and I'm going to come back to that as we go through. The area that we were in, we had a lot of tree canopy and cover, but a lot of light in the background, right? So where we were, it was really hard to get enough light. So you can see I'm at an ISO of 4,000, and I'm only at 1/320th of a second. For me, that almost never happens. Like my basement is about 800, 1/800th of a second. 1600 is where I can breathe. Everything under that, I'm scared to death in wildlife photography. Things happen fast, and sometimes no notice whatsoever. So being able to come all the way down to 1/320th, I did it slowly, but I also did it consciously, knowing that if something happened, I had to be ready to crank that right back up. But it did get me down to that 4,000 ISO, which was a pretty comfortable noise level, considering what I was dealing with. So again, going back to emotions, core emotions, things like joy, sadness, anger, like these are sentient creatures. They have emotions. And interestingly enough, this is an image. It was with a group of amazing photographers in Alaska. And this little cub was wandering around at the river's edge. Mom had just caught a fish, and she was gnawing away on it. A great big male grizzly started coming up the shoreline. And the little one caught a whiff of him. Mom hadn't figured it out yet. But little one caught a whiff, bolted out of the water, climbed the back of Mom like a cat on a curtain, and was just pounced right on top. It's like, wow, like full alert. The little bear knew exactly what to do. Mom still was not really paying attention, and everybody was getting pictures of the bear up, and he was looking around, and it was a pretty neat moment. Big guy came around the corner, looked at Mom, Mom looked at him. He decided not worth it. He turned around, went away, and she just kind of looked around a little bit more, just checking out the atmosphere, and really quick, he just nestled down like that. Now, most people that I was with did not get this image, because they did one of two things. They either put the camera down to be in the moment, and I do respect and appreciate people that want to do that. But as a photographer, if you're there to photograph, you can't afford to do that. And I don't mind keeping that camera up. I find that just shuts everything else out. I don't pay attention to anything but what I see. I felt so connected to her and to that little cub because I kept my head in the game. Or else they were looking to see the images that they had gotten already. So they were pixel peeking a little too soon. But those are the kinds of things, again, we talk about relatable. Who doesn't love a mom and baby, right? Everybody's got a mom, to my knowledge. I don't think it's possible otherwise. So those are really important things to talk about today. So as you can see, and I'm being brutally honest, ideally I would not be at 1/4000th of a second on this. But when that male came up and Mom was there and in defensive mode, my thought is if something goes down, it's going to be fast and furious. So I kicked it into 1/4000th, right? Very quickly he turned around, and as soon as he did, little guy just nuzzled right in. Now, here's my moment of honesty with you. Ideally, yes, I would have turned that back down, and I would have been at, 1/800th of a second, and I'd have had a lower ISO. But I'm okay with 1500 on my ISO. I still have control over the speed, and speed is king when it comes to wildlife photography because that's sharpness. That stops the movement. So I left it where it was. I made that conscious choice to instead stay in the moment. To me, waiting for something like this was far more important than faffing around with all the little controls and trying to dial stuff in. So I put it on my camera to have my back so that I could get my head in the game for the image. So next one. Okay, so there we go. Here, the laughing. So this is one of the wild horses we went out to photograph. Got some beautiful images, you know, the big manes and rearing up and fights. But this one for me stood out because it's relatable. People look at it, it's like he's either smiling or he's laughing, or, yeah, it's not a pretty smile, mind you. But it's relatable to anyone, whether they've ever seen a wild horse, whether they know it's a wild horse. It's a cause to pause when they're scrolling through all those images. And again, so 2500th, 1/1600th of a second, that's my happy place. That's where I almost always keep my shutter speed. If I can go more, if it's bright, I'll go more. I love 1/4000th of a second. I just want it stopped. I want it crisp. I want to make sure I catch the action. So these guys goof around and they play. I didn't expect this to happen, but head in the game. Weird things happen, and you just got to watch for those moments. Okay, so next step. So the next suggestion, this actually falls on us as creators. Preparedness. Prepare to be rare. So I've got a couple images, maybe not the most beautiful, stellar, epic. I may not be printing them and selling them, but they definitely got attraction on social media. So here, this great gray, I've got much nicer pictures of great gray owls, but this is a very unusual picture. And this is because I've had so much time to spend with them to understand their behavior. So this bird, as big as they are, they're only a couple of pounds. They're not heavy, they're all fluff. But for him to land on that little sparse tree, he had to work and fold and collapse his wings into place, which told me to get out of that tree, he's probably gonna have to do the same thing. He's gonna have to get up and over. He can't just jump off like they would if it was a pine tree. Sure enough, when it came time, he gave that little wiggle. It's like, oh, it's gonna go. Turn up that shutter speed, right? We're at 1/1600th, and this was nighttime. Like, this was as much speed as I could pull out of that camera to get where I was really comfortable. I know I can go higher in the ISO, but I can get away with this without touching it. I don't even have to run it through software, which is a really important thing for people that don't want to spend their entire lives behind a monitor. So at 7.1, because I wasn't sure which way he would open, I wanted to have a little bit more depth of field. And he wasn't honestly a whole lot of distance from me either. So the closer you are and the shallower that depth of field, the higher the chance I'm going to have a lot of blur, right? So open that up a little bit, 6400, 1/16th of 100, and when he opened all the way to the tips, everything came out pretty sharp. But it was just a really odd thing to see an owl's legs that long, right? So it makes people think, again. Who doesn't love a spirit bear? So spirit bears, funny story. This is not the first encounter that I had had with a spirit bear, but this is where this preparedness thing comes in. First time we went to see one, we were in a torrential downpour for over 8 hours. 8 hours, no cover, no shelters, nothing. Just us in the great outdoors. Nothing but pouring rain the whole time. We had one little black bear that flanked us as we were sitting there, came up right beside us, kind of curious, and then he just skirted off, and that was it the whole time we were there. When that bear came out, when we got word that, hey, there's a spirit bear coming your way, well, everybody's like, ah! Everybody lost their mind, grabbing their cameras, trying to get stuff. You're nervous, you're excited. You need to understand that. That's okay. You're going to feel that way until you do this a ton of times. That's part of what you've got to go through to condition yourself and get to a place where you've got that nice, solid mindset and you're not feeling all that anxiousness. So everybody got the pictures that they needed, but they weren't great. The bear was way across the river on the other side, deep in the bush. He popped his head out, but there was no separation of background. Like, it wasn't pretty. So when we ended up going here, And we sat down, the water was nice and low, so we got all the way out to the rock edge. And I looked up one side, looked down the other. It's like, man, if that bear comes in either direction, it's beautiful background, there's beautiful logs and all the moss. And it's like, okay, you know what? I can just hear it in my head. I'm getting excited. So I need to be ready. So I did. I had to have everything ready, my ISOs, my shutter speed. Kept talking to myself about, every once in a while, because you sit and you visit while you're waiting. But every once in a while, I'd just stop, pick up my camera, just get my hands on it, make sure. And sure enough, when he came, he was probably almost 50 feet closer before the majority of the group got pictures that they were happy with. There was a lot of movement, there was a lot of shifting around, everybody's excited, and that's just understanding our own limitations and working within them, and then using the camera to offset it. That relationship, we're gonna build that beautiful relationship between us and our equipment. So this one, 1/1600th of a second. I know I don't need 1/1600th for a bear that's going about this pace. That's not so fast, they're nice and graceful. But if the right salmon swims by and he bolts, I still have that picture, right? If a bird comes down and lands on his head and goes for a ride, and he's all flared out, I've got that picture. Whatever it is, I feel like I'm ready, and I'm totally good with the ISO at 2000. No problem at all. Prepared. So this one a little bit different. For me, I really push my camera to do a lot of work for me. So in that last scene where we had the bear coming up the creek, one direction he was backlit, the other direction the light was on the bear, and it's a white bear in a dark forest. So for me, a lot of times I will rely on my auto ISO, I will focus on my shutter speed, and I will take every other ounce of capacity I have and think about the composition and the image and watch the behavior and really lose myself in what they're doing and let the camera handle the rest, except for situations like this. When these whales come out of the water, an auto ISO won't work because first thing it's focused on is the movement. And it's great, it tracks it, but the whale is dark, so it lights it up. But you see a few little water droplets around him, like a lot of water droplets? Those turn white and they blow out completely. So knowing that he's gonna come out of that water, I set the ISO intentionally at 1600. So even if he came out and it tried to brighten it up and I didn't want it that bright, I was set. So ISO's at 1600, it's not like there was sunlight, I didn't have to worry about which way it was coming, I just had to make sure it was set for this scene and that my shutter speed was where I needed it to catch the action, and all the little water drops. If you look at the whole series, you can see there's kind of like little lines of water even coming off of them that follow the shape, of their texture. So it was a really good learning curve, and this is an R3, right? Everybody says you can't use, R3 is not really a wildlife camera. I beg to differ. It works great for wildlife. You don't have the pixels you would with an R5, fair enough. But in a lot of cases, we have plenty of pixels anyway. You don't necessarily always have to be, at 45 or 50 pixels. Okay, leveraging perspective. So this is a little bit different. I'm gonna go to this in the broad sense of the word. So this isn't just about getting down really low or getting over to the side. This is a different kind of perspective. To get a really impactful image where you are giving your subject a voice, you want to tell the story from their perspective. This is what I mean. So we need to look at life through their eyes. Sometimes that means getting low, but sometimes that just means being a really good student of their behavior, understanding what they're going to do. You're still going to get surprised. There are things we saw a couple of days ago in the Kutsumateen I've never seen a bear do before. It didn't make any sense. In fact, the guide, our captain that we were with, 30 years in that estuary, had never seen a couple of the things we saw. It happens, right? They're living creatures. They kind of go by their own script, bless their hearts. But I think the thing we really need to look at is trying to start combining elements. So in this one, yes, I was down low because the birds came down low. Whatever was going on between them, I wanted it to be at their level. I wanted someone to feel like they were part of that story. And then the look on his face was like, are you kidding me? what are you doing? And it's like, wow, that's relatable. So now I'm starting to combine some elements. I actually have more than one thing going on. So we're starting to pile up. Those elements will start to give us, the facial expression, checking the settings, making sure that the technical side is there. We have 1/4000th shutter speed, because I know stuff is going on. Lots of light, though. 1500 ISO, no problem. That's going to give me a good image all day long. Next one. This little fella playing peekaboo behind the grass. This was in Ecuador. I'm going to show you the exif on this. I only had my R3 with me at the time, not maybe the typical macro type of camera. And you see that lens? Yeah, 100, 500, those little suckers jump. And they jump far and fast. And I was not getting any closer than 100 mile distance because I don't know what else they do. But still, it was about moving around. When you looked at him and you saw him in the grass, it's like, okay, well, that's okay. But to me, it's like, ooh, he's a spider, like big creature. So I thought, well, if I get down really low, maybe even at or under, and separate the background, let it look like he's a bit bigger, and he's got that, big power struggle going on there. I thought this will give me a pretty good, clean image. And it did, and then he moved around the side. It looked like, literally like he was playing peekaboo, right? All of a sudden, we've added an element that's relatable, which is kind of weird, but it makes you stop and think, which is kind of neat. And again, so more than position, that connection in this particular image, the big thing everybody was focusing on, he was playing with the stick, which was pretty cool. But for me, just staying in the image, not putting down the camera, I'm watching him, it was like somebody broke it. And he's just like so dejected. That body language, are you kidding me? Who has not felt like that? You just dropped your ice cream cone on the cement. One lick, down it went, right? So I saw that. It's like, okay, that touches, that hits the heart. That's a story, and that can stop someone from scrolling. And as soon as I can do that, I can talk to them about it. One of the things that's going to be really tricky with imagery like this, and I think it's one of our biggest struggles as wildlife photographers, is that we are there, we have every sense firing. We hear, we smell, we feel, we see, all these things going on. These moments are ingrained so deeply in our hearts and in our minds. But to someone that hasn't been there, they get one split second, and you're trying to convey all of that in one image. That's an immense amount of pressure as a photographer, as a creator, to get all of that in one shot. But these are just the little elements that are going to help do that, at least to get their attention. And then the rest of it, just the timing. Okay, so next thing, tell the whole story, right? So it's not just about our animals. It's not just about what they're doing or what they look like. It is about what they call home. That is as connected, completely interconnected. Their environments are part of their very existence. If we don't give them a voice to protect those environments, we will not have these beautiful creatures. I can't say I love grizzlies, but I hate fish. That ain't gonna work. I won't have grizzlies if I don't support the salmon that are in these waterways, right? They're all connected. So again, sometimes we just need to step back and give people a tiny bit more than just the action. It's not always as fun, but it's so important that we do that. Again, ecosystems are so fragile, so being able to show them that, look, this is his home. He is so comfortable, mountains, beautiful, tundra everywhere, just chilling. The guy's got it made. And then this one. So again, I love loon shots. We have a beautiful, just talking to one of my friends here, Gary, down at Winchell Lake, right? We have beautiful loons down there. And if you go early enough, there'll be as many as 6 loons on that water, long before anybody gets there. I don't understand their behavior as far as this pack thing goes, because you never see it during the day. You always see a couple, just a pair. But being able to step back, like this looks like it was, I don't know, in the middle of some vast wilderness, not Little Winchell Lake. But it's telling the story of how it needs that space. It's important that it has these places to have their babies and to raise their little chicks, right? And again, 4,000th of a second. If I zoom in on that, I can see water droplets. It's so important that we're ready. Okay, this one was actually caught in Alaska, and I love this one because it shows us in the story, right? This is actually a good news story. It doesn't matter if it's positive or negative, but if you're out there and capturing things, sometimes it might be, an owl sitting on a tractor in the middle of a field, but it's showing that we have had impact on the lives of these animals and that they're adapting. So in this case, this is actually basically a guardian of the forest. So he is out tracking the bears, making sure things are the way they are supposed to be, people are behaving the way they're supposed to behave. And these are the salmon. These are the sockeye salmon. The waters run red and rich with life. We would sit on a little tiny spit in the middle of the river, and we would literally have 30 grizzlies around us. Males, females, cubs, all of them in the same area. So little risk for them because they're all there for one thing. They're all there for this. They tolerate each other. Behavior is totally different there than it would be here in Alberta, for instance. But great stories to tell. Okay. So with that aside, telling the whole story means we need to use the whole camera. You need to come back and leverage those things that we fall short on. And this is really, really important as far as getting yourself to that next level, because there's only so much you can do. How many people are out there with their camera every day or at least every second day in this room, by show of hands? More than I expect. Wow, more than I expected. Not everyone, because it's not uncommon to have to put it down for a few days or weeks, even months sometimes. Life gets busy. But you go backwards. It's not like riding a bike. You lose the intuition. So it takes a bit to get that back. So the more we can count on our cameras to help us out, the better position we're in. So I'm going to go through a few. Yeah, we're doing good for time. I'm going to go through some of my favorite mirrorless features on the Canon cameras as they relate to wildlife photography. Okay, so if you're someone that doesn't shoot full manual, totally fine, because you got to work to get there. You might be in auto or even semi-automatic mode. If you're in semi, or if you're not yet, the first place I would start would be the time value mode. TV stands for time value, or it means shutter speed, right? Wildlife, speed is king. We need to stop the action. We want to have the choice. It can be a conscious decision to slow it down if you want to make something artistic. Apparently that's a whole phase right now. I feel differently. I actually like to see the animals. But doing that requires a few different things. And actually, one thing really quick, there is a difference between a blurry image and a soft image. A lot of people lump those into the same category. Blurry, we can fix, because blurry is based on motion or movement, which is why we're talking about shutter speed. A soft image, that could be a focal issue, so maybe not in the right place, but there are two elements to getting a sharp image. So if you find your images are not, just a little soft, not quite there, first thing you have to do is figure out why. Which reason is it? Is it soft or is it blurry? Two different things. Okay. So one of the best elements about these cameras, and I like using the back button focus, is that it is ideal for changing conditions. If you have a 100-500 and you haven't tried it yet, there's a programmable ring. It's right close to the camera body. I've gone in and I've changed that ring to be time value or shutter speed. Okay? So if I'm sitting there taking images of something and all of a sudden it bursts, I can do this. One little roll of my finger and I can go from 1/500th of a second to 1/4000th. Just like that. And then right back down if he lands and I want the light back in. But that takes a lot of practice to do. But again, I'm using the power in that camera to make up for what I may not be otherwise going into the back of the camera trying to fix. May not have time for, may not have a clear understanding of. The capacity to focus on our shutter speed, right? If we let the camera do some of those auto ISO settings, because you're changing conditions, or it's a bird and it comes from this way, it swoops around, it goes that way. You've got different backgrounds, you've got different foregrounds, lights changing. Let the camera do some of that work for you. Keep focus on the animal and your shutter speed. Just take a little load off yourself, because those are really important things that you can control. And let your partner take on the rest of it, right? And again, sometimes, so all of a sudden you have a choice, bird stop moving, I can slow down my shutter speed. I can let more light into the camera. I can bring down the noise, just like that. And as soon as I see him move or I see another bird come in, I'm gonna flip it right back up high shutter speed and catch him when he jumps off, right? So it's just getting good control over the camera settings. So performance in the TV mode, great place to start if you're not in full manual. I actually had somebody ask me on my last trip, you can be in manual mode and still use auto ISO, right? Not everybody knows that. So it's important to understand you can still work in manual mode, have your ISO set on auto, and be able to just control shutter speed. And if you want, you can adapt the aperture as well. I usually keep my aperture, try and get as soft a background as I possibly can. We have a depth of view preview that you can set in the camera, so I can actually see the difference it makes in the image. When I adjust that, I can see more of the background, I can see it soften. That is a really cool feature. Man, we learned the hard way without things like that in the past, I tell you. So the tracking on these things, wow. Second to none. And the back button focusing, that's where this really becomes important. If you haven't tried back button, I really encourage you, just try it. I know it won't be easy the first, second, or third time. If you stick it out for at least 3 tries, you will never regret that you did. The biggest thing it's going to let you do is it's going to let you pick which element and focus system the camera is going to be best suited for. So if I have a bird flying tight into the tree line, how many people have tried to photograph a bird right against the bush and it's just going all over it? Yeah, as great as our tracking systems are, they're not infallible. Like, there's got to be some sense where I can hear it saying, "Are you kidding me?" My camera is literally like, "What are you thinking?" So I have to take a little bit of control in that situation. So instead of tracking, I flip my thumb to the other side and I select spot focus. I override the system, I take the pressure off my partner, and I say, let me get this one. This one's on me. And I will try and track it myself. And of course, as soon as he gets away from the trees, I flip back over, and now it's trying to do the eye tracking focus again. And it normally picks back up on it. But the cameras have strengths and weaknesses just like we do. Sometimes we have to intervene and take a little bit of pressure off of our partners. So again, being able to move back and forth on things, catching interactions, like this is 3 bald eagles and 1 golden eagle in the middle. When you zoom in, you can actually see their claws are on each other's chest, fighting for scraps of fish out near Kutsumateen. Being able to track, like, look how close they are to the background, how busy that background is, right? That's where it gets to be really difficult. So I had to take it off of auto, especially with the golden eagle. Golden eagle's all brown. The white heads, they tend to stand out, but I didn't want it focused on the bald eagles. I wanted the focus on the golden eagles. So I had to take control, use my spot focus to bring it into play. This beautiful fella, so again, just got back from Kutsumateen, swimming out in the water. Oh, water and sun. Oh, who doesn't love that challenge, right? With water, we get all those little reflections moving and dancing and trying to pull that autofocus, trying to grab its attention, as opposed to a dark brown bear swimming in the water, whose eye is very hard to find in that situation. So again, this came down to having to take it off my partner, had to focus on that manually with my spot focus. Once it got my target, I let go. The bear is swimming with us. He's not coming towards me. My focal distance never changes. So I let go of my focus button. Now I'm just composing. Now I'm just taking images, checking my shutter speed. I don't have to keep refocusing. He's not going anywhere, right? So thinking about it, how can I relieve my partner? We already got the focus set. Let me do the rest. I got this. But I also had to keep my shutter speed up on this because you just never know with these guys. And sure enough, he bursts into the old head shake, right? And of course, this is where you need to be comfortable with the ISO settings and the shutter speeds. But all I had to worry about was my shutter speed on this and composition. I gave myself all that room. The camera handled the rest. Once I had my focus done, all the heavy lifting was out of the way. Loons. Who doesn't love the loons? Landing, taking off, flaring up, doing their beautiful little check me out dance in the middle of the water. Being able to capture and track those things. Again, we had dark background, had some light to deal with here. So that really threw the sensors off as far as metering goes. But tracking? I couldn't believe it was tracking a dark-headed bird along tree lines. It tracked him from one end of the lake all the way down the middle and right in front of me where he landed. It was a beautiful system. I'm watching it, but it never struggled. If it did, no problem, other button, and I can take over the focus for it. But just being prepared, right? That's our end of the deal. Okay, so easy metering in tough conditions. So here's another thing with back button focus. And when you get to be a lot more comfortable with the camera, you will probably adopt this. It does take a little bit to get used to this concept, but for instance, if I have, let's take a look at this. I don't know which image I have coming up next. Okay, so in Ecuador, so we've got really blown out background light, and I've got a dark bear in treed area. So it's not really easy to see the detail in him because it's metering for the background, right? So the background, all of a sudden, it thinks it's super bright and it makes the whole image dark, or vice versa. But once I have my focus on here, the bear's not running around a lot, so once my focus point is set, I can take that little target of mine and I can move it around the scene. And it's attached to the metering. So as soon as I move it into the light, the whole image goes dark. Focus didn't change, but all of a sudden the brightness comes down. If I move it onto the bear, the darkest spot, the whole thing goes bright. A little too bright, background's blown out. So I could just move it around till I found the perfect spot for lighting and take my shot. So I actually controlled the metering, even though it's done by the camera. I did the fine tuning just by moving that little spot sensor around because I had back button focus. These are things, they're not really easy to do, but these are all things that you can start adding to the repertoire once you start getting really comfortable with that camera equipment and those functionality. It's the same thing with here. Whale tail and environment, trying to capture and tell the whole story. Had a lot of sunlight, so just trying to move it around to make sure I still had some detail in the clouds, still have my whale tail in there. Same with this. This was another one. The sailboat wasn't going anywhere. It wasn't rocketing across the water. It's just sitting there. The clouds were moving, which was fine. The mist was moving, but it was just playing with that little cursor. Once I had the focus spot, moving it around, a little lighter, a little darker, there it is. That's the one. That gives me depth in the trees and still gives me detail in the clouds. It was really easy to do that, but because I had back button focus. Couldn't have done that if I had focus on the front. Okay, so these are basically the things that I try and go through when I'm in the field. All these little elements on top of, if I can get the camera to take this stuff over, like I said, I have the capacity to just be in the moment, to be an artist, to make sure I'm ready for that story, for that one split second that means more than every other minute I spend out there. That's what we have to do. That's what's on us. That's the control our cameras give us. And that is really, really cool. So, I think with that, I know I'm tired of hearing me talk. We should probably go out. I did bring camera gear. So for anyone that came in today, for as long as I have, if you've got questions about setting up the camera or how to use that camera, I really want you to come to me with them. Please don't feel like, I should know this, or she's going to think it's silly. I have been there. Every single person that has a camera had to start somewhere. And it is so hard to find good information out there nowadays. Information's plentiful, but it's not always good. And it doesn't necessarily address your specific requirement. So don't be shy. Come up. I want to be able to share anything, ideas, concepts, anything about equipment. I did bring my camera gear, my lenses, and my bag, so if people have questions about that, I know I've done a few posts in the past about how I handle that big 600 lens. It comes up to here on me. I get mocked a little bit in the field by the other people. It's like, ooh, look at you. But there's a way that, again, every time you find a problem, if there's an issue out there, there is a solution. Just got to look for it. Or find someone else who's already done the hard work and the heavy lifting, and they can tell you how to fix it. I'm very good at doing that. I just use other people's experience, so.
Perfect. Jacquie, thank you so much. That was an amazing presentation.
Oh, thank you.
I wish I could only take like that. Like some of your photos, I wish I was half as good.
Oh,
You know?
no, it's just everybody can be. Everybody can. We just got back, like I say, from a little excursion out into the Kutsumateen, and I had several photographers that were actually portrait photographers, had not done much for wildlife. They'd done some, certainly not like this. I mean, we had situations, you to me away from the bears, and they had never been out and been in that kind of situation before. But they all came back with incredible images. But again, lots of talking, lots of planning. They worked for those images. Yeah, the bear was right there, but there's a lot that goes into it to make it work.
So
right?
that being said, I mean, you're that close to bear. You know, we're told not to be that close to bears. You know, have you? What safety precautions do you take? Do you do you go with guides all the time? Do you go with guides with guns? Pepper spray, right? Like,
yeah,
because that's
good
you're
questions.
very close.
We're extremely close, and it depends where you're going too. Big part of what we do, and this is something that I pulled in from the sports side of my photography. I really had to study the sport and the athletes that I was photographing to be effective at catching a story. Same thing happens with wildlife. So when I made that shift from sports into wildlife photography, the technical components were very intuitive, very easy. But I didn't have the knowledge of my subjects yet. That's what took me the time, was to understand their movement, their moods, how to capture emotion and stuff. So when we get out there, for instance, the first time I had an opportunity to go to Alaska, and I saw pictures of people and bears, it's like, what? I signed up for this?
It's going to be like unnerving at first.
I need to learn a thing or two. So I went to the Canadian Bear Viewing Guide Association, and I took a course. I took my level 1 bear guiding certification. At the time, no intention of doing any guiding myself, but I wanted to make darn sure when I was out there, I didn't do something, especially by accident, that jeopardized the animal I was watching or the people that I was with. And it was my lack of knowledge that I was most scared of. So I went there, learned how to do the proper guiding, learned how to read the signals, and it's actually pretty shocking to me. I've been out a few times with people that have been photographing bears for decades, and we'll be walking along, especially here in Alberta. This is much different. Do not get this close to a bear in Alberta. Please don't do that. Don't say I was listening to Jacquie. Don't do that. This is definitely a different kind of situation. These bears in the places that we're in have been conditioned to recognize, respect that they are safe with the people and the zodiacs that are around them. They get constant, continuous, repetitive experiences. They don't feel threatened from it. That's why we get these opportunities. You pull up to a bear in a ditch in Alberta, they're probably going to feel a little different about you getting out next to them. So understanding the wildlife and the positions and where you're going, yeah, that's a huge part of it. And that kind of comes on us, right, to make sure that we're safe and the people we're with, and certainly the animals, are going to be safe.
Now, notice you love your 1-500. That's like your go-to lens. Now, compared to running with like a 600mm lens, you have the option to use that. What are the big challenges between using a big prime like that and 1-500? And are you running two bodies, with one and one with the other?
Yeah, actually, I kind of swap back and forth depending on conditions as far as body goes. Aside from the slight price difference between
There's only
the
one
two.
extra digit. It's really not that bad when you think of it that way.
One. I think having that creative control again, right? Being able to pull back, tell the story, and get that environmental image in there is really valuable. I love the detail and the close-ups, because there are times where that intimate connection has so much value in the images that we capture. And that's where I love the 600, but there's also times, so on the Zodiac, for instance, we had some windy days. So it's not just the wind doing this to you, it's this. And then 7 other people in the boat shimmying and moving, and it's a Zodiac. So every time someone moves, we all move, right? So you have that to combat as well. Another reason to go to a fast shutter speed. So there were times with my group, they're like, wow, we don't really need that fast. Like, he's not really moving. It's like, the bear's not moving, but we're moving, right? We're moving like this. We're excited, the boat, the wind. Wow, give your partner, give that camera a break, right? And take some of that pressure off. So those are things that make, I think, a really big difference out there.
Canon's got a fantastic stabilization system, right? I mean, between the lens and the bodies
Thank
now,
goodness.
right? We have dual stabilization. But at what point do you stop hand-holding, or what can you deal with, and do you switch to a monopod?
So I
Or tripod.
try and use a monopod, not so much for stabilization as much as physical wear and tear. As light as the lenses are, especially if you're videoing, or if it's you have 20 minutes with a bear that's in close proximity or something, you want to stay in that moment, and 20 minutes is a long time to handhold a 600.
Well, you use one of my favorite pieces of kit on your monopod, right? You
I
have the
do.
MH100.
MH100 is fantastic. Small, compact, easy to pack. It almost gives you like that gimbal type of movement where you can pivot the camera in multiple directions. But I bought like a very inexpensive, I brought it with me. I'm going to grab it.
Okay.
Little fishing harness. So it's actually
I did not expect
made.
that, by the way.
It's actually made for
A
a
fishing harness.
Yeah, it's for fishing poles. Because I'm cheap. There you go. I said it.
You're thrifty. You're cost effective.
There you go. But honestly, I don't like the idea of a monopod or a tripod. Coming from the sports world, no such thing from my type of photography. It was always smaller lenses, fast action. There was no monopods or tripods where I shot from. You couldn't do it. And we were in mountains on the side of the hills, like there was no place to put equipment like that. So I really struggle with the thought of having a monopod and feeling tethered. I know it was better than a tripod, but I bought this little baby. I put this around my waist, and it just sits on the side like this. And when I have the monopod on my camera, I have it sitting in here. So now, if I'm up, when I move down, if I'm on the boat, if I'm to the side, the weight stays in here. It stays off my shoulders, and all I have to worry about is getting the shot composed. That helped a ton for me, because, I don't know, without it, it'd be a lot shorter sessions, let me tell you.
And you're also running the Peak Design capture clip as well. That's one of your favorite bits of
I
kit.
love that versatility, because you can put it, like I keep an extra one on the belt on my f-stop Talopa pack that I carry with me. I also keep one pinned up here. So Alaska was a great example. We were, you're dodging through willows and over tundra and lots of scrambling. Same with Ecuador. But you come around a corner and bang, right there, eye to eye. It's like, camera, gotcha. Everyone else is like, trying to get their bags off and pull their stuff out. Gone. And it's like, well, I got like 20 or 30 pictures. But it's because it's sitting right there ready to go. And it's not always the perfect place. Sometimes it's got to go in the pack, depending where you're going. But I like having options. And I think it's good as photographers, as creators, that we make our own options.
Excellent. All right, who's got a question? In the back.
So one question I have is, when you have a really powerful body and not so powerful lens, when you pair them together, what is the go-to feature that you got on the body in order to overcome some of the shortcomings that the cheaper lens is introducing?
So you're talking about a better quality camera body with a lesser lens. So one of the first pieces of advice, I'll throw this out there, that I got when I started with photography, is always invest in the best glass you can possibly afford, more than the camera body. It will last you longer. It will serve you better. The camera bodies will change over time, and there's different, it depends really on the specific camera that you're talking about, because they all have, they've changed so much. There's different advantages and disadvantages. Are you talking like a DSLR?
I'm talking about, so in my specific case, I have an R5, and that's where I went a little wrong with the investment. And then
Okay.
For the lens, I have an RF 800, but it is the
F11.
Yeah.
yes, that is correct.
Okay.
So those are the combination, and I realized that in terms of the refocusing, it is quite slow. It's very sluggish when it comes to moving objects at least.
Yeah.
It provides that focal length, but then when
Yeah.
it comes to speed, it is very limited.
So with an F11 stop, you need to give it light. It needs light to exist. Something like an F4, I can obviously push that in so many more conditions. It makes its own light. The more light it has, the easier it can find the subject for tracking. So the one thing I would think about doing, because you have an R5, I would rely, if it were me, I would probably be popping in and out of that crop sensor mode. So I keep, I make my own custom menus. It's one of the options we have. And for my wildlife, I keep my crop on that custom menu. It's always available to me. That's where I leave my camera when I'm shooting. And what that does is all of a sudden it gets me closer to the image, which allows less distraction for the system to find the subject. I can always switch back after, if I've got my focal point now, to capture more of the image if I want. But you've got a lot of pixels, right, with an R5. If you can afford to go that much closer, because you also have a lot of lens.
That's a very technically challenging combination, actually. 800 mil, period, on any camera is very challenging. You got to get your shutter speed way up with F11, but also you've got tons of resolution with the R5, and it's a fantastic camera. And so you get the micro blur happens a little bit earlier with the higher the resolution camera. So it's a kind of a double hit for you. So concentrate on keeping your shutter speed up way high. I mean, that's my number one rule when I'm selling long glass to people is, play with your shutter speed.
And it just means lots of light, because you can't go less than the F11, right? So there's limitations. Sometimes just recognizing there's only so much I can get with this lens, that's the truth. Sometimes that happens. Like I said, the camera is going to be like, what, dude, are you expecting from me?
The one thing I do with... the one exercise I always tell people when they're buying new lenses, especially big long telephoto lenses, is set it up on a tripod in your backyard, take yourself out of the equation completely and see what the maximum image quality you can get with that body and that lens is, and then see if you're the one adding in the blur, adding in the problem. Right? And then you can learn from there.
Ooh, moment of truth stuff.
Sorry.
Deep.
Sorry, I wasn't taking over.
No, it's a great idea. Yeah.
But no, we run into that because so many people. So come through and they're like, oh, this lens is crap. I can't get anything out of it. And you're like, double your shutter speed, come back and talk to me.
When they have those the tours, like the equipment tours that Canon puts on, get out there. Honestly, that is how I ended up with the 100-500 lens. I had a chance to try the 600 f11 because I like that idea, that extra reach, right? Prime lens and, maybe better. But trying them back to back, that made my decision for me. Mind you, it also got me throwing down a few grand for an R5. so, there's that trade-off.
We also have, the Canon makes an RF 100 to 400, which is a much more budget-oriented lens, but performs very good. It's surprisingly sharp compared to what you're looking at the 1 to 500. I'm not going to argue. The 1 to 500 is fantastic.
I made my career on the 1 to 4. All the sports action I did, all the X Games or Monster Energy or Supercross, Motocross, AMSOIL series, road racing, it was all 100 to 400 lens. So,
all right.
Yeah.
All right, anybody else?
The back.
How many times do you see yourself going to 500 on your lens, 100 to 500?
Oh.
Do you live at 500?
No, actually, and that's changed a lot in the last year. Okay, so to give this some context, I'm new at wildlife photography. By comparison to a lot of wildlife photographers out there, I am very new at it. It was just a much easier transition because there were so many similarities to sports. So with that said, one of the things I found when I first got into the wildlife thing is I would get home so excited because it was such a beautiful bird, and I bring up the pictures, and it's like same, like 30, 40 pictures. The bird might have blinked. I was like, what are you doing? But I was excited. It was new to me, right? So now my goal is when I get back, other than because I might be in a burst mode, I don't want to see more than 2 or 3 images the same. They may not all be great images, but I am constantly changing. I have a line of sight. It looks beautiful. Great. I'm going to walk away because I have that one. 9 ways to sideways. I've already done it. I need to move. There could be one better. Might not, but there could be. So moving around, in and out with that zoom. If I hold a zoom, work that zoom. Because you never know. Like I say, sometimes those broader ones, you get back home, it's like, man, is that ever beautiful? You know, it just makes you feel like, wow, that beautiful background, and just him, he's just powerful overlooking things. But you don't have that control if every image is zoomed, cropped, super tight, right? So creative control, taking it back.
I mean, yeah, like shooting with a 600 f4 or a 400-2.8, these super lenses are amazing, right? Like they spoil you for other lenses because they
Yes.
have a certain look to it. Nothing looks like a 400-2.8. It's phenomenal, right?
It's pretty cool, yeah.
But they're very expensive, and they
Yeah.
have their limitations. And if you're out and about, how much gear do you want to carry? I mean, you run the
Oh.
f-stop bags, and they're very comfortable, great build quality bags. But
Yeah.
what's the average weight of your bag that you're carrying for days on end?
25 to 35 pounds, depending on
Do
where
you bring
I'm going.
food as well? Is that what's
Nope. Nope. No food, few clothes. It's all about the camera gear. Yeah, no, it's the same thing with our last group that went out. Same thing. I'm like, if you've got, you know, we're going for 4 days. If you have 4 shirts, it's 3 too many. You know? 3 too many. You need room. You need options for your camera gear. So leave the stuff you don't have to have. It's not a vacation. It's a totally different experience. You're going to get the images. That needs to rule the roost. So, yeah.
Now, when you run the R3 sometimes and
Yes.
the R5,
Yep.
right? Two sort of
Oh, yeah.
they're different cameras. Do you find the loss of resolution on the R3, that much of a difference compared to the R5? I mean, we look at it, it's like massive, 20 megapixels
Yep.
plus, right? Difference in
Yep.
resolution. Do you see that?
There are situations for sure where you will notice it. So if you're way off in the distance and I really need to zoom in for someone to even tell that it's a certain kind of animal, my R3 is going to be a tougher one to do that with. I may not have, but I mean, I'm really cropping in to do that. But the tracking ability that I have with an R3 over an R5, that's the game changer for me. The tracking is mind-blowing. And I've got some images that I have printed, big images, and been very fortunate to sell that are done with an R3 with wildlife. So yeah, I don't have all the pixels, but have I got the motion? Have I got the movement or the moment? Because that camera could follow something I wouldn't have thought a camera could. So I have to make that conscious decision. And there's a lot of times where I'll switch my bodies and lenses, and it might be because I want to capture certain video at a certain distance, and I like one camera versus the other, the setup for that. So I mean, I do change mine more in the field than a lot of people say, oh, you can't disconnect your in the sports side of things, we're hard on it. I can't tell you how many times I've watched lenses and bodies cartwheel down a tarmac because we're piled into little places and you're putting things wherever you can. So I know they can take a lot. Sorry, Canon, he probably didn't want to hear that. But it is a good replacement system when you throw things around.
There's
The
less involved
cameras,
when it's rental gear, right?
they are very durable equipments. So put your creative self first. Let the equipment set up and work the way you need it to capture that moment, and be flexible. Always look. You know, it's taken a lot of trial and error to figure out which combination works best for which situation. Depending on the subject, depending on how much it's moving, depending on the lighting, I'll swap back and forth. I don't have a hard, fast, always the 600 with the R3 and always the R5 with the 100, 500. It flips back and forth. Great question, depending on the situation.
I asked that because I have one before, and there are times, especially during birding, which I recently started, that I find that 400 is like not sufficient enough.
Oh, to get close.
I feel like I have Nikon Z9 and one before. So
Oh, we can fix that.
but yeah,
So birding is it's a really good challenge. I mean, even if you have to go in your backyard, little birds fluttering around, or gophers even in a field, there's baby gophers out right now. Those things are loony. They're tackling each other and jumping, and great challenges to try and catch with the cameras, right? And to set up your focal. So with something like birding, that's where I go to my 100-500 almost always, because it can be so easy to lose them with a fixed length. I mean, you're trying to see where they are and figure out where that is in regards to this big zoom you have, where 100 you can come back out, there he is, and go back in. So that definitely is a challenge if you're on a fixed focal length that's longer for birding, but stick with it. If you can make that happen, you are well on your way. There you go.
I tell people actually, if they have, or you want the 400 or 2-500 or whatever system you're with,
Yeah.
and you want to see what it's like to shoot with a 500mm lens, is set your lens to 500 and duct tape it or gaffer tape it. So treat it like a 500mm lens and see what the experience is like shooting with a big prime like that. And it's kind of eye-opening for a lot of people. They realize, man, I don't like walking that much.
It really is a huge mind shift to not have control if you're used to a zoom. To go to a fixed, I did not like it at first. As great a lens as it was, I did not like all the struggles that came with it. And again, you got to stick with it, and then you figure out, okay, there's a time and a place where nothing's better. But there's the majority of the times and the places where it's maybe not the easiest way to go. So.
Well, cool. Any other questions?
How many times do you end up using the electronic shutter compared to the mechanical shutter because you have the advantage?
Always. Always. Unless I'm doing night photography when you can't have your electronic shutter on because you need to slow it down that much, always have electronic on. And that's a habit in the sports world. Try and imagine this. You're in a big pit of photographers and everybody's waiting, nothing's really happening, and all of a sudden you hear it starts to go. Everybody all at once, up, and everybody gets the image. When the silent shutter thing came out, it's like stealth mode. Nobody knows what you're doing. Oh, totally. So like at X Games or something like that, everybody's sitting around there talking, and I'm like, yep, here we go. Take it away. They got no idea what's happening. So same kind of thing with wildlife. If you are a competitive nature and you don't want to share the moment, you can keep it to yourself. But even more so if you're in close proximity, no distraction for the animals. Right? They don't stop to listen. They don't hear. It is really nice for that. It's so funny because this last trip we went on, I forgot what it sounds like when you have a whole bunch of people clicking. And if you're not used to it, try it first. Go in the backyard, focus on a garden hose or something, and try your shutter speed. I guarantee you're going to walk back in that house with 200 shots, your dang garden hose, because you don't hear it working. And you're like, oh, this thing's, I don't hear anything. It's like,
my memory card's full already.
Yeah,
What's going on?
yeah, it's a rite of passage. That's how it
that
goes.
being said, we have, the R5 shoots 20 frames a second, R3 is 30 frames a second, then the R8 does 40 frames a second up to that. Do you always keep it on high-speed burst?
Depends what I'm photographing. A bear, not necessarily. Spirit bear, you bet. You bet I will. And I know I'm going to have to go through a lot of images, but I get the one I want. I don't have to worry about, the eyes were closed, or for that second he snarled, or, I can see every little movement of that claw and get the perfect one where you see the beautiful light, the extension. I love that creative control. So birds, anything super fast, for sure, and then those really special moments, like the whale breaching, high speed for sure. Things like the Andean bears, that's a really rare opportunity. Nonstop. So many cards, so many hard drives.
So that brings up the other side of it, so
yeah.
the post-production side of things.
Yeah.
Do you call very aggressively, and do you delete do you X and just delete a bunch of stuff and clear off your hard drive a little bit? Or do you keep
Finally,
everything?
yes. Finally, I do. I cannot physically afford more hard drives, especially shooting high bursts. So I will go through and do a skim. And what I've done now is I'll look at all the images and I'll just mark. There's a couple of free online programs that are really good and fast for being able to view and mark your images. For those here, if you have any questions, we'll go through that. But I go through really quick one time, and anything that's good or anything from a series, the best 2 or 3, I'll keep, and everything else will go. And then I'll sit down when I have time, usually a little while after, try and give a little bit of separation, and I'll come back to it from a creative perspective. I keep my hard drive with all the images, just in case, but I only look at these ones. And if I get through them all and I'm happy with them, then I wipe the other one out. I don't go back to it. But if I get through them and I see the 2 I caught were okay, but they're both a little soft. Maybe there's one a bit better. I can go back, double check. That's the one I needed. And then I keep that. So I've, again, learning to cope with my shortcomings. And that's a system I think everyone's got to kind of figure out what works best for them.
Now we got time for one more question. Excellent.
Nice. Excellent.
I mean, if you had to, what's your dream trip? What's the next one coming up for you?
Next one, we go to Alaska on Wednesday. We're scouting out a new lodge opportunity. There's very few places there where you can actually camp right where the bears are, as opposed to float planing in. And the big issue with that is there are a lot of winds that come over the channels. So like the last time we were in Alaska, we actually ended up on the at Brooks Falls. And I don't know if you've heard about that, but you line up for 2-3 hours for your half-hour window, elbow to elbow, shoulder to shoulder with all the other photographers. When we went, we had 2 days of channel weather that was so bad they grounded all the flights. There was our little group and 2 other people. We left the platform because we were bored taking shots. Like, we had it to ourselves because we were already on that side. So finding places that get you right where you are, that's a really big thing with some of these trips that people don't realize, because you don't get a refund when you lose half of your trip because of weather. So we're going out to scout a new place with a lodge right in the middle of the wilderness, which I'm very excited about. Then it's off with Adventure Canada for about a month, traveling to Greenland and through Baffin Islands, just meeting people from all over the world, which I'm really excited about. Come back and we'll be hitting Africa this year, which I am also, for me, that's a big dream trip. Lots to learn before
So I got one
then.
more question.
Yeah.
Do you need an assistant? And
I think
that sounds horrible. It's a horrible way to go.
the hubby's
Oh, we got one more
always
question. We're sneaking
threatened me with that.
Just triggered the question. So you just said lots of prep work for Africa.
Yep.
And you mentioned
Yep.
you take the bear guide course.
Yep.
How do you find how to prep yourself? Because you're going somewhere and you don't know the animal. Like, what are the resources to use?
Either guides or photographers that I know of that have been there in the past, I'll talk one-on-one with them to find out about the experience, and then I'll do my own research. If I know I'm going to photograph gorillas, which we have 2 days that we're spending time with them, I am going to make sure that I understand exactly what that place looks like, what the facilities are like, are there certain times I can get in, what are the proximities, what are the families there, like I'll research all of it. Ask me. Ask me, reach out, let me know where it is you're planning on going, and if I can help connect you with someone, or if I know, great, but if I can connect you with someone, even better. Because you will save yourself a lot of frustration, and you will come back with such better images if you're prepared for where you're going. And that's what it's all about, right? You want to enjoy it and not feel like you're missing something when you're there. So that's a great question.
Perfect. Sounds
Appreciate
good.
it.
Well, I want to thank Canada for joining us and sponsoring tonight's
Yes.
event and bringing you in here as well. Russ is going to be here for a while, and there's a few donuts left, but we got tons of Canon gear to demo, plus our own store we can demo with the Canon gear there.
Awesome.
Thanks for our TCSTV Live Dream team for supporting us in the back to make sure everything goes smooth. Good day. And if you haven't received that special offer from Evelyn yet, it's just evelyn@thecamerastore.com. She'll send you that special offer. Guys in the crowd here, I'll tell you about that once we go off air. But thank you so much, Jacquie, for joining us. It's fantastic to have you.
Always a pleasure, my dear.
Sounds good, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Make sure you tune into our YouTube channel, and if you haven't already, make
Yep.
sure you like and subscribe, and we'll catch you guys next time.
Yeah, and an early Happy Father's Day to all those
yes.
papas out there. If you get a chance and you can take a few things and some time for yourself, you know what? Even if it's raining, get out there and go spend some time behind the lens tomorrow. Have a good time.
Sounds good. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.